The Greek key quilt block looks pretty complicated with this intricate interlocking spiral design, but there's a pretty easy construction method, and today I'm going to show you. Welcome to Epida Studio. My name is Elizabeth and I help you make beautiful things with quilting, portaging, and embroidery. So the Greek key is a quilt block that's based on the traditional Greek design of a square spiral. So we can see it has this red spiral interlocking with this white spiral. And this seems like it's a pretty complicated design, especially if you're thinking of constructing it like a log cabin block where you start with the center and then you're rotating around the middle. It can get pretty confusing. But today I'm going to show you an easy technique that will take away all the confusion of the construction. So this block uses two different fabrics, usually a light and a dark contrasting fabrics. So I'm using this red and white. Of course, you can use whatever colors you want. So choose what fabrics you want to make your block, and then let's get started. So to make the Greek key quilt block, we're going to use a lot of different pieces, but all of these pieces are 1.5 inches wide, and they're just different lengths. So with the light fabric, we need pieces that are 1.5 inches long, 2.5, 3.5, and they keep going up by 1 all the way up to 8.5 inches long. And then with our dark fabric, we're going to use the same. So this is 1.5 by 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, all the way up to 9.5. So it looks like a lot of pieces, but don't get overwhelmed by that. They go in logical order. Each one is just 1 inch longer than the one before it. 1.5 to 8.5, 1.5 to 9.5. If you want to see this written down, then I do have a link below that goes to a written tutorial so you can see all the numbers, but don't be overwhelmed by that. And so now to start, this block looks kind of complicated when you are trying to picture how it goes together, but don't get overwhelmed by that. We're going to start with our two 1.5 inch squares, and we're going to start by just sewing those together with a 1/4 inch seam. And this is a great time to check that your 1/4 inch seam is accurate and check that your cutting is accurate. So these should both be 1.5 inches square. We're going to sew those together. So now they're sewn together. This piece should be 2.5 inches long. So that is how you're going to check your seam allowance. So if it is not 2.5 inches long, then you're going to need to adjust your seam allowance so that it will be exactly the right size. So now we're going to go for our 2.5 inch long pieces. So you'll notice there's one of each color. So just with this center part, I'm going to put one on the top and one on the bottom. So because this block looks like a spiral, it looks like we should be putting red, 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 and kind of working in a spiral, but we're not sewing in a spiral. You'll see the spiral kind of come out as we put our pieces together, but don't think about adding them in a spiral. We're just putting red on top and white on the bottom. So here we have the red and white pieces added. So now we're going to go to our 3.5 inch strips, and we're going to put one on each side. And we're going to put red on this side because we can see the spiral starting to come around, and we'll put white on this side. So we don't want to put this side because then that would look more like a log cabin block. You're going to end up with all your red on one side, all your white on the other side. We are mixing it up. So we're putting red and white on opposite sides. And when those are joined, then we're going to join our 4 inch strips, and then we put our red 4 inch strip on the bottom and our white 4 inch strip on the top. And so now you can really see the spirals starting to come out in this block. So we're not doing it like a log cabin where we would start on one side and we would move around either clockwise or counterclockwise, but we're adding the strips on opposite sides at the same time. So 3.5, 4.5, and then we would continue on adding our 5.5 inch strips. We'll put red on this side and white on this side, and you can probably predict the next one is going to be our two 6.5 inch strips. We'll put 6.5 red on top, white on the bottom. And so as you put the block together, you can see the spiral coming out. So anytime you're not sure which side to put the strips on, lay it out just like this. Have your piece in the middle and then lay your two pieces. So you know each time, each step, you're going to add your strips of each color, and one's going to go on one side, the other one's going to go on the opposite side. So once you break it down like that, it's not too difficult to assemble. Now for pressing, I press the seams away from the center piece so both seams are pressed toward these strips. And I'm going to continue pressing in the same way. So in this one, the seams are going to be pressed away from the middle piece. So you're always pressing towards the bar that you're adding on. And that is if it is the dark fabric or if it's the light fabric. For both ways, press towards the bar that you're adding on. And we're just going to continue in the same way until we get to the end of the block. So here's our block. We've added almost all our pieces, but we can see that it's not quite square. This direction is 9.5 inches and this direction is 8.5 inches. So we have our final lone red strip that's 9.5 inches. We'll add that on this side to finish off the square. And we easily by now know that it's going to go on this side. It's not going to go on this side. And we can see that the square spiral has come out as we've stitched our pieces together. So here's our finished block with all the pieces on. And we can see it looks pretty complicated if you're trying to figure out how to lay out the pieces. But when we break it down, it's actually pretty simple. So have fun using the Greek key quilt block in your next quilting project. And for more quilt blocks and other quilting tutorials, patterns, classes, and inspiration, check out my website, epidastudio.com.